The line went dead, a sudden, jarring cessation of sound that lasted only a split second, yet felt like an eternity. Then, as if the silence had been merely a coiled spring, a piercing, primal scream erupted, tearing through the quiet hum of the dispatch center. It wasn't just a cry, it was a shriek born of terror, desperation, and an agony so profound it resonated deep within the chest of every operator within earshot. Time seemed to warp, stretching the fleeting moment into an agonizing eternity. Lives, unseen and unknown, hung precariously in the balance, suspended by the fragile thread of that single, horrifying sound. The nature of the emergency remained shrouded in a terrifying mystery. There was no context, no preceding words, just the raw, visceral terror of a human being pushed to the absolute brink. This unknown added a suffocating weight to the immediate tension, transforming the ordinary workday into an arena of impending catastrophe. Was it an accident? A violent assault? A sudden, brutal act of nature? The unanswered questions clawed at the mind, each more chilling than the last. Amidst the cacophony of the scream, a fleeting sound, barely perceptible, cut through the noise. It was a muffled struggle, a desperate gasp, perhaps the sickening thud of something heavy hitting a surface. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the scream was severed, leaving behind a silence far more terrifying than the preceding noise. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of an empty room, but the heavy, suffocating silence that follows a violent act, pregnant with unspoken horrors. From somewhere deep within the subconscious, an unseen dispatcher reacted. It was a rapid, almost involuntary movement, a hand shooting out to trace the trajectory of the call, eyes scanning monitors with frantic intensity. The training, the years of experience, the countless hours spent listening to the mundane and the catastrophic, all coalesced into an instinctual response. A life was in peril. That much was undeniably clear. The brief calm that settled after the scream was not a reprieve, but an intensification of fear. It was the terrifying void where echoes of unimaginable events lingered, where the mind raced to fill in the blanks with the most dreadful possibilities. The air in the dispatch center, usually thick with the murmur of conversations and the click of keyboards, now felt heavy, charged with an unspoken dread. Every breath seemed to catch in the throat, every heartbeat throbbed with a sickening intensity. In that profound silence, a chilling realization dawned upon the dispatcher. A critical decision was imminent, one that would ripple. The critical decision, a heavy burden, now rested squarely upon unseen shoulders. For Alex, however, the shift had begun much like any other, wrapped in the familiar hum of the dispatch center, a sanctuary of controlled chaos nestled in the heart of a quiet American town. It was a place where ordinary lives intersected with extraordinary moments, and where the mundane often served as a deceptive prelude to the menacing. Alex, a seasoned 911 dispatcher, felt the weariness of too many overnight shifts settling deep in their bones. The fluorescent lights cast a sterile glow on the rows of monitors, each displaying a mosaic of maps, call logs, and emergency protocols. Years of listening to fear, pain, and sometimes heartbreaking banality had etched subtle lines around Alex's eyes, a testament to the silent battles fought from behind a headset. The evening had unfolded with predictable monotony. The initial hours were a parade of routine calls, the kind that filled the bulk of any dispatcher's log. A frantic report of a lost tabby cat, its owner inconsolable over the disappearance of their furry companion. A fender bender on Main Street, resulting in more bruised egos than actual injuries. A teenager, experimenting with a new vape, had triggered a smoke alarm, causing a minor panic in their suburban home. Each incident, though seemingly trivial, required the same methodical approach, the same calm voice, the same meticulous documentation. Alex navigated these calls with practiced efficiency, the words flowing automatically, the fingers dancing across the keyboard, entering codes and details into the system. Beneath the veneer of professional composure, a subtle fatigue gnawed at Alex. The repetitive nature of the calls, the endless stream of minor inconveniences mixed with the occasional profound tragedy, wore down even the most resilient spirit. A faint sigh escaped Alex's lips as another caller reported a suspicious squirrel on their bird feeder, a testament to the quiet desperation that sometimes permeated these long hours. The air in the dispatch center, usually a symphony of clicking keyboards and muffled conversations, was deceptively peaceful, almost boring. It was the calm before the storm, a quiet interlude that often preceded the most harrowing events. A brief, light-hearted interaction punctuated the quiet. "Another thrilling night, Alex?" A familiar voice chimed from the adjacent console. It was Mark, a younger dispatcher whose boundless energy often served as a counterpoint to Alex's more jaded demeanor. Alex offered a small, tired smile. "Just living the dream, Mark. You know, saving the world, one lost cat at a time." Mark chuckled, the sound a comforting anchor in the steady stream of information. This brief exchange, a fleeting moment of human connection, reinforced the normalcy of their shared experience, the quiet camaraderie that formed the backbone of their demanding profession. In front of Alex, on the polished desk, sat the phone. It was an unremarkable piece of equipment, a functional tool of daily routine, yet it possessed an immense, almost sacred power. Its buttons were smooth from countless touches, its earpiece worn from thousands of whispered confessions and desperate pleas. For now, it sat idly, a silent sentinel awaiting its next command. The small, usually quiescent light next to the line button remained dark, mirroring the calm rhythm of the night. Then, without warning, a sudden, almost imperceptible flicker. A tiny, insistent beacon of light pulsed from the phone, signaling an incoming call. It was a silent alarm, a gentle nudge from the universe, announcing the imminent arrival of something new, something unknown, something that would irrevocably shatter the quiet predictability of Alex's night. The phone's flicker, initially a subtle interruption, intensified, demanding Alex's immediate attention. With a practiced motion, Alex lifted the receiver. The familiar weight a comfort, yet a prickle of unease already began to spread. 911. "What's your emergency?" Alex's voice was clear, calm, a stark contrast to the strained, almost inaudible whisper that responded. "Please, help me." The words were barely discernible, laced with a tremor that spoke volumes of terror. It was not the usual panicked shout, nor the frantic babble of someone in immediate distress. This was something far more insidious, a fear so profound it had choked the very breath from the caller. Alex's seasoned ears immediately caught the anomaly. The caller's voice was unnaturally soft, as if afraid of being overheard, yet simultaneously desperate. "Mom, can you speak up? I can barely hear you." A long, agonizing pause ensued, punctuated only by a faint, almost imperceptible rustling sound. Then, a slightly stronger but still whispered response. I'm lost. I need directions home." Alex's brow furrowed. The tone of voice, the sheer terror emanating from it, did not align with a simple request for directions. People calling 911 for directions usually weren't whispering in abject fear. Subtle discrepancies began to emerge. Alex, with years of experience sifting through layers of panic and confusion, felt a familiar knot tightening in the gut. "And where are you calling from, ma'am?" Another hesitation, longer this time. I'm at the old mill, just beyond the bridge." The old mill. Alex knew that area well. It was deserted, crumbling. Not somewhere someone would casually get lost looking for directions, especially not in the dead of night. The story wasn't adding up. Small details conflicted, creating a dissonant chord in Alex's mind. A growing unease settled over Alex, a sensation honed by countless shifts spent on the precipice of human suffering. This wasn't a lost cat or a fender bender. This was different. A cold dread began to seep in. Alex leaned closer to the receiver, straining to catch every nuance. Faint background noises began to penetrate the line. A distant siren, almost swallowed by the night, barely audible, but there. Then a child's cry, muffled, quickly stifled. Alex's heart hammered. A child. The caller hadn't mentioned a child. And what was that other sound? A low, guttural murmur, too indistinct to identify, but undeniably present. The caller's hesitation became more pronounced with each question. Alex tried to gently probe, to elicit more information, but met with evasive answers. Long pauses filled with palpable fear. "Are you alone at the mill, ma'am?" A sharp intake of breath, then a shaky, "Yes." Completely alone, just me. But the child's cry, the muffled voices, they contradicted that claim. Alex's suspicions solidified into a chilling certainty. Something was terribly wrong. This caller was not alone, and certainly not just lost. "Ma'am, can you tell me your name?" Alex asked, keeping the voice steady, reassuring. "My name is Daisy. Please, just tell me how to get to Elm Street. I'm so confused." Daisy. A common name. Elm Street. A perfectly ordinary street. But the way she said it, the desperate urgency behind the mundane request, sent a shiver down Alex's spine. Then, a seemingly innocuous phrase, delivered with a sudden, almost imperceptible shift in cadence. "I left my purse by the red truck, near the old oak tree." Alex paused, the words echoing. Red truck. Old oak tree. These were details that had no place in a simple request for directions. They were too specific, too deliberately placed. A hidden message. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The whispered voice, the feigned confusion, the background noises, the specific details dropped like breadcrumbs. Alex understood. Daisy wasn't lost. She was trapped. And that seemingly innocent phrase, "I left my purse by the red truck," was not a statement of forgetfulness, but a desperate, coded plea. Alex's blood ran cold. The caller was in immediate, grave danger, unable to speak freely, sending out a silent scream for help through a carefully constructed lie. This was a hostage situation. Alex's mind raced, processing the chilling revelation. Daisy, the woman on the other end of the line, was being held against her will. The old mill, the red truck, the old oak tree. These weren't random details. They were fragments of a desperate plea, a breadcrumb trail laid by a captive. This wasn't just a call. It was an invisible battle being fought over the airwaves. A silent war where every word was a weapon, every pause a potential trap. The weight of this understanding crashed down upon Alex with immense force. Here was a human being, trapped, terrified, and relying entirely on Alex's ability to decipher her coded distress. The realization brought with it a stark, terrifying clarity. There was no standard protocol for this. The training manuals, thick with procedures for medical emergencies, traffic accidents, and even active shooters, offered no clear directive for a hostage situation disguised as a lost motorist. How do you respond to a cry for help that couldn't overtly be uttered? How do you send aid without alerting the captor, without escalating an already volatile situation into something far worse? Alex knew that every second counted. The subtle shifts in Daisy's voice, the forced casualness, hinted at an immediate threat, a rapidly deteriorating scenario where delay could be fatal. A brutal dilemma presented itself. Sending help, dispatching sirens and flashing lights to the remote old mill could easily tip off the hostage-taker. The sudden arrival of law enforcement might provoke a violent reaction, putting Daisy, and potentially the child Alex had heard, in even greater peril. The very act of intervention, designed to save, could become the catalyst for disaster. Yet the alternative was unthinkable: inaction. To do nothing, to treat this as a simple misdirection call, would be to abandon Daisy to her fate, to allow a life to be potentially lost on Alex's watch. The ethical quandary was a suffocating weight, pressing down with the force of 1,000 atmospheres. Alex felt the cold sweat prickle on the back of the neck, the heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the ribs. The responsibility was immense, singular, and terrifying. An internal conflict raged within Alex. The dispatcher's training emphasized protocol, procedure, minimizing risk. But this situation defied all conventional wisdom. It demanded improvisation, a leap of faith into the unknown, the weight of responsibility, the understanding that Daisy's life, and perhaps the life of a child, rested squarely on this next decision, was almost unbearable. Alex felt a tremor run through the hands, a cold dread washing over the entire body. The silence on the line, punctuated only by Daisy's shallow breathing, stretched taut, vibrating with unspoken fear. Then, a flicker, a tiny spark of an idea amidst the overwhelming darkness. Daisy had mentioned the red truck and the old oak tree. These were not just parts of a coded message. They were potential markers, specific enough to narrow down a search area, yet vague enough not to immediately alert an eavesdropping captor. It was a small piece of information, almost lost in the torrent of fear and deception, but it offered a glimmer of hope. A potential path forward that wasn't outright intervention. It was a chance to act subtly, to gather more intelligence without immediately revealing Alex's hand. Alex took a deep, shaky breath, the decision crystallizing in a single terrifying instant. It was unconventional, risky, and flew in the face of standard operating procedure, but it was the only way. The choice was made. Alex would not send a full-scale police response with blaring sirens. Instead, a more discreet approach was needed. It was a gamble, a desperate roll of the dice, but inaction was no longer an option. Alex knew this decision could lead to disaster, to a tragic outcome that would haunt forever. But it also held the slim possibility of salvation. The consequences, Wulunshi Hao Shipi, were now Alex's to bear. Alex's fingers flew across the keyboard, a flurry of precise, urgent commands. The decision, though terrifying, had been made, and now execution was paramount. The dispatcher didn't waste a single moment. Instead of a standard shots fired or hostage situation alert that would trigger an immediate high-profile response, Alex crafted a message coded for discretion, yet imbued with palpable urgency. Possible domestic disturbance, unconfirmed details, caller reports unusual activity near Old Mill, advise silent approach, recon before engagement, focus on red truck and old oak tree for visual confirmation. Within seconds, the alert flashed across patrol car terminals. Officer Miller, a veteran with a keen sense of intuition, caught the unusual phrasing. Unusual activity, silent approach, recon before engagement. These were not standard domestic disturbance protocols. He knew Alex, and he knew when Alex sent a message like this, it meant something far more sinister was unfolding beneath the surface. Miller's cruiser, along with 2 others, peeled off from their routine patrols, lights off, sirens silent. The officers communicated via secure channels, their voices low, their movements coordinated, heading towards the isolated derelict structure known as the Old Mill. Simultaneously, Alex activated the next phase of the plan. Paramedics, normally stationed at the city's main hospital, received a standby order for a potential unknown injury incident in the vicinity of the Old Mill. The language was deliberately vague to avoid panic or premature deployment, but the underlying message was clear: prepare for the worst. Ambulances were quietly repositioned, their crews briefed on the possibility of a volatile scene, their medical kits checked with an extra layer of diligence. They understood that unknown injury from Alex often meant something far graver than a simple fall. The fire department, too, received a cryptic notification. Potential structural instability. Possible hazardous materials at old mill location. Monitor situation. Stage resources. Captain Reynolds, a grizzled firefighter who had seen his share of bizarre calls, raised an eyebrow. The old mill had been abandoned for decades. Structural instability was a given, but hazardous materials was new. He ordered a small engine company and a hazmat unit to a staging area a few miles from the mill, ready to respond if the situation escalated, their presence hidden from immediate view. However, the path to the old mill was not without its challenges. One patrol car encountered unexpected road construction, forcing a detour that added crucial minutes to their response time. Another officer reported a communication glitch, a momentary static burst that garbled a critical instruction. These seemingly minor obstacles, unforeseen and frustrating, gnawed at Alex's resolve. Each delay felt like an eternity, every second a betrayal of the desperate plea still resonating in Alex's mind. As the first responders cautiously approached the mill, the tension mounted, not just in the dispatch center, but also on the ground. Officer Miller, now within visual range, reported seeing a faded red pickup truck, exactly as Daisy had described, parked haphazardly near the dilapidated structure. He also spotted the ancient, gnarled oak tree, its branches reaching like skeletal fingers towards the overcast sky. The confirmation sent a jolt through Alex, a mix of grim satisfaction and renewed fear. The pieces were fitting together, but the picture they formed was terrifying. Inside the decaying mill, the hostage-taker, a man named Silas, grew agitated. He paced the dusty floor, his shadow dancing eerily in the dim light filtering through the grimy windows. Daisy, huddled in a corner, clutched her child tighter, her heart hammering against her ribs. Silas had a sixth sense for trouble, an almost animalistic awareness. He felt the shift in the air, the subtle vibrations of approaching danger, even before he heard anything. His eyes darted nervously towards the entrance, his grip tightening on the crude weapon he held. He barked an order at Daisy, his voice laced with a fresh edge of menace, demanding silence. Then, piercing through the tense silence on the live wire, a sound reverberated, sharp and unmistakable. It wasn't a scream, nor a crash. It was the chilling, unmistakable crack of a single gunshot. The sound echoed, a violent punctuation mark in the unfolding drama, sending a wave of icy dread through Alex's entire being. The chilling report of the gunshot sent a visceral shockwave through the dispatch center, freezing Alex in a moment of agonizing suspense. On the ground, the sound had a more immediate and terrifying impact. Officer Miller, having just confirmed the pickup truck and the oak tree, instinctively ducked behind his patrol car, his hand already on his sidearm. The crack had been undeniably close, originating from within the derelict mill. Other units, still approaching, accelerated, sirens now wailing openly, their caution replaced by an urgent need to intervene. The subtle staging of resources had now erupted into an active, high-stakes confrontation. Within minutes, the old mill, an edifice of forgotten industry, became a hive of frantic activity. Patrol cars skidded to a halt, their flashing lights painting the decaying facade with strobing blues and reds. Officers, their faces grim and determined, spread out, establishing a perimeter. Sergeant Davis, the incident commander, bellowed orders, his voice cutting through the rising tension. Miller, secure the front. Johnson, perimeter left flank. Everyone, maintain cover. Suspect is armed and hostile. The air crackled with a palpable sense of danger, each officer acutely aware that they were stepping into a situation where lives, including their own, were on the line. Inside the mill, chaos had erupted. The gunshot, fired by Silas in a moment of panicked agitation, had not struck Daisy or her child, but had instead embedded itself in the wooden beam inches above Daisy's head, sending splinters showering down. The deafening report, however, had momentarily stunned her, allowing Silas to roughly pull her to her feet, dragging her towards a boarded-up window, a desperate attempt to use her as a shield. Daisy, fueled by a primal fear for her child, fought back with a ferocity she didn't know she possessed, screaming now, her voice raw with terror. Her child, clutching her leg, wailed inconsolably, the sound piercing and heartbreaking. Through the dispatch line, Alex heard Daisy's renewed screams, the child's cries, and then the muffled shouts of officers demanding entry. The sense of helplessness was overwhelming, a cold knot tightening in Alex's stomach. Had the snap decision, the unconventional strategy, led to this escalating violence? A wave of self-doubt, sharp and insidious, washed over Alex. Every protocol broken, every risk taken, now seemed magnified, potentially culminating in a tragedy that would forever haunt the quiet dispatcher. The weight of responsibility pressed down, crushing and inescapable. Then, a new sound cut through the cacophony, the distinct, rhythmic thud of a battering ram against the mill's heavy wooden door. Officers, having quickly assessed the immediate threat and the need to neutralize it, had made the decision to force entry. The door groaned, splintered, and then, with a final, violent crash, gave way, allowing a rush of armed officers into the dimly lit, dust-filled interior. Flashlights cut through the gloom, illuminating the scene. Silas, wild-eyed and desperate, holding Daisy tightly, his crude weapon now pointed directly at her head. "Drop the weapon! Police!" Sergeant Davis's voice boomed, amplified by the confined space. Silas hesitated, his gaze darting between the armed officers and the terrified woman in his grasp. Daisy, seeing a flicker of opportunity, twisted violently, attempting to break free. It was a small, desperate movement, but it was enough. Officer Ramirez, a young officer with quick reflexes, saw the opening. Without a moment's hesitation, he lunged, tackling Silas to the ground, disarming him in a fluid, practiced motion. The struggle was brief, but intense, ending with Silas subdued and handcuffed, his reign of terror brought to an abrupt end. The immediate danger had subsided, but the aftermath was stark and unsettling. Daisy, trembling uncontrollably, collapsed to the dusty floor, clutching her sobbing child. Officers moved swiftly, securing the area, checking for additional threats, and calling for medical assistance. The mill, once a silent monument to decay, now buzzed with the controlled chaos of an emergency response. The air, thick with dust and the lingering scent of gunpowder, still vibrated with the echoes of violence. Over the live wire, the sounds gradually shifted. The shouts of confrontation gave way to the calmer, yet still urgent voices of officers reporting the situation. Suspect is apprehended, victim secured, child is safe, requesting paramedics immediate. Alex heard the words, each one a fragile thread of relief weaving through the lingering dread. The immediate threat was over, but the silence that followed, once the final reports were made, and the lines went quiet, was heavy. It was a silence laden with the trauma of what had just transpired, a testament to the lives forever altered by one call and one decision. The immediate aftermath at the old mill was a chaotic ballet of purpose and precision. Paramedics, having been staged nearby, swarmed the scene, their urgent footsteps echoing through the cavernous space. Daisy, still on the floor, was gently lifted and placed onto a stretcher, her face pale and streaked with tears, but her eyes now held a flicker of dazed relief. Her daughter, cradled securely in an officer's arms, was quickly reunited with her mother, their embrace a silent symphony of survival. Both were assessed for physical injuries, and though shaken, their wounds appeared superficial, a testament to their incredible resilience and the timely intervention. Silas, secured and defiant even in handcuffs, was led away, his menacing presence finally removed from the shattered tranquility of the mill. Back at the dispatch center, Alex sat motionless, the headset still clamped to one ear, listening to the final, clipped reports. The silence that had descended on the line was profound, a stark contrast to the cacophony of moments before. A wave of exhaustion, deep and bone-weary, washed over Alex, making the chair feel impossibly heavy. The adrenaline that had surged through every vein now receded, leaving behind a hollow ache. The relief was immense, a tidal wave that threatened to capsize the carefully constructed composure. Yet it was inextricably mingled with the raw, visceral trauma of having been a silent witness to such harrowing events. Every scream, every muffled plea, every thud and shout replayed in a relentless loop within Alex's mind. The human cost of the incident stretched far beyond the immediate victims. Sergeant Davis, his face grimed with dust and etched with fatigue, barked orders to his team, the weight of command evident in his posture. Officer Ramirez, despite his heroic quick thinking, leaned against a patrol car, visibly trembling, the adrenaline crash hitting him hard. Even the seasoned paramedics moved with a subtle tremor in their hands, the proximity to such raw fear leaving its indelible mark. The community, still reeling from the shock of the news that had begun to spread like wildfire, would grapple with the ripple effects for days, perhaps weeks. As the first tendrils of dawn painted the sky in hues of orange and violet, news vans began to descend upon the mill, their bright lights piercing the fading darkness. Reporters, microphones thrust forward, clamored for details, their voices a new kind of noise intruding upon the fragile peace. The story would soon dominate headlines, a sensational tale of a daring rescue and a dangerous captor. Yet amidst the flurry of cameras and eager journalists, Alex remained an unseen hero, a disembodied voice in the night. No one would know the name of the dispatcher who had made the impossible choice, who had gambled with lives based on a whisper and a prayer. The routine of the dispatch center, once so predictable and familiar, now felt irrevocably altered. The shared glances among colleagues carried a new depth, a silent acknowledgement of the extraordinary events they had collectively endured. The phones, usually symbols of mundane calls, now seemed to hum with a latent power, each incoming ring a potential gateway to another life-or-death scenario. Alex's perspective on the job had shifted fundamentally. The thin line between order and chaos, between safety and peril, had been laid bare in the most brutal way imaginable. As the shift finally ended, Alex walked past the rows of blinking consoles, each phone a silent sentinel. The one that had connected Alex to Daisy, to Silas, to the terrifying truth of that night, seemed to glow with an almost ethereal light. It was just an object, a piece of technology, yet it held the immense power of connection, of decision, of life and death. Alex looked at the silent phone, a symbol of the immense power and responsibility it held, forever changed by the echoes of a single, unforgettable call. The days that followed blurred into a surreal haze for Alex. Returning to the familiar hum of the dispatch center felt both comforting and profoundly unsettling. Every incoming call, regardless of its innocuous nature, carried a faint echo of that night, a phantom tension that tightened Alex's shoulders. The shadow of the mill incident, of Daisy's terrified whispers and Silas's chilling presence, lingered like an unwelcome guest, refusing to dissipate entirely. The familiar sounds of ringing phones and radio chatter, once a soothing backdrop, now seemed to pulse with a hidden narrative, each signal a potential harbinger of another life-altering crisis. Alex grappled internally with the outcome. Daisy and her children were safe, a monumental success by any measure, Yet the images of their ordeal, the sheer brutality of Silas's actions, were difficult to reconcile with any sense of triumph. There was no celebratory parade, no medals for the unseen heroes of the dispatch center. The victory was a quiet, internal one, tinged with the bitter taste of what could have been, what almost was. Alex carried the weight of that success, a heavy mantle woven with relief and residual trauma. The question of whether the unconventional decision had been the right one, the only one, continued to circle, a relentless current in Alex's thoughts. Subtle acknowledgements passed between Alex and colleagues, a knowing glance from Mark, a brief, almost imperceptible nod from Sarah, spoke volumes. They understood not just the technical aspects of the job, but the profound human burden it entailed. They recognized the unique crucible of responsibility that forged dispatchers, the isolation of making life and death decisions in the dark, tethered only by a voice on the line. It was an unspoken bond, a silent pact among those who stood on the precipice between chaos and order, their hands on the lifeline. The entire incident served as a stark, undeniable testament to the power of one decision. Alex's snap choice, born of instinct and a desperate need to save a life, had rippled outwards, touching dozens, perhaps hundreds, of lives. It had mobilized an entire emergency response system, brought a dangerous criminal to justice, and most importantly, returned a family to safety. It was a powerful, terrifying affirmation of the immense impact a single individual could have. A stark reminder that every call, every moment, held the potential for monumental change. This story, like so many others, shone a quiet tribute on the unsung heroes of the emergency services. The dispatchers, the police officers, the paramedics, the firefighters. They were the bedrock of society's safety net, often operating in the shadows, their bravery and dedication rarely celebrated in the public eye. They faced humanity at its most vulnerable, its most desperate, and its most dangerous, day in and day out. Their resilience, their unwavering commitment to serve, was the invisible force holding communities together. The experience also served as a profound call for empathy, an encouragement for anyone listening to consider the sheer complexity of these roles. It was easy to judge from the comfort of a sofa, to criticize decisions made in split seconds under unimaginable pressure. But to truly understand, one had to imagine the weight of that phone, the chilling silence, the desperate plea, and the impossible choice. It was a job that demanded not just skill, but an extraordinary depth of compassion and an iron will. The lingering question, the one that resonated long after the news cycles faded and the immediate danger passed, was about the constant, unseen battles fought daily. How many other Alexis were out there, making similar impossible choices in the quiet of their dispatch centers? How many lives were subtly, profoundly altered by the unwavering dedication of those who answered the call? The world, for all its noise and distraction, was held together by these quiet acts of heroism, by the silent resolve of individuals who stared into the abyss and chose to reach out a hand. If this story resonated, if it offered a glimpse into the unseen heroism that underpins our everyday safety, perhaps it deserved a moment of reflection. Consider the dedication, the sacrifice, and the profound responsibility carried by those who answer when everything changes. Engage with the reality of their world, and perhaps share this narrative to acknowledge the silent guardians among us.